They put a wedding ring on my finger at sunset. They put handcuffs on my wrist before midnight. Same day, same dress, same hands. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, Lord, what did this woman do? And that's exactly what 12 jurors thought too. That's what my neighbors thought, what the newspapers printed, what strangers screamed at me on the courthouse steps while I kept my chin up and my mouth shut. But here's the thing, nobody wanted to hear back then. And it's the thing I'm going to tell you tonight, every last piece of it. I didn't do it. And it took me 6 years behind bars and one impossible discovery to prove it. Before I go on, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I read every single one, and it does this old heart good to know I'm not talking to an empty room. And if stories like mine, real stories, from women who've lived long enough to have some, if those matter to you, hit that subscribe button. It costs you nothing, and it keeps me telling the truth. Now, where were we? Handcuffs. Right. My name is Ruth Ann Culpepper. I'm from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, born and raised on the wrong side of the levee, and at 62 years old, I stood in a Charleston mansion in an ivory dress I didn't pay for, marrying a man I did not love, and who did not love me. And before you clutch your pearls, let me tell you, it was the most honest arrangement of my entire life. More honest than most marriages I've seen, if we're being real with each other. His name was Walter Brandt, 78 years old. Jewelry money, old money, the kind that has buildings named after it, hands that shook when he signed his name, and eyes that could still cut glass. Everybody in Charleston knew Walter Brandt. Nobody knew him at all, except me, the caregiver, the nobody from Louisiana who showed up with one suitcase and a dead husband's photograph folded into her Bible. That night, after the cake was cut and the champagne was poured, and his family smiled at me the way alligators smile at ducks, Walter went up to his study to rest. He asked me to bring him his heart medication at 10 o'clock, same as every night. I climbed those stairs at 9:58. What I found in that room is something I will describe to you exactly once in this story, and when I do, I want you to remember every detail. Because one of those details, one small, quiet thing that everybody overlooked, the police, the lawyers, the judge, one detail was the truth, sitting in plain sight for 6 years. And the person who put it there danced at my wedding. Let me start at the beginning. Because to understand that night, you have to understand the water. Before Charleston, before the mansion, before any of it, I was just Ruth Ann from Baton Rouge, and I had a small life that I loved with my whole heart. 38 years married to Dale Culpepper. He drove a delivery truck for a beverage distributor, and I spent my working life as a home caregiver, bathing, feeding, medicating, and mostly just listening to elderly folks whose own children were too busy to call. People ask me if that work is depressing. It isn't. It's holy if you do it right. You learn what people actually need at the end, and I'll tell you a secret. It's never money. It's somebody who stays in the room. Dale and I never had children. It just didn't happen for us, and after a certain number of years, you stop asking God why and start thanking Him for what's on the table. We had a little brick house off Choctaw Drive, a porch swing Dale built crooked and refused to fix, and Friday nights at the Waffle House where the waitress knew our order before we sat down. Scattered, smothered, covered. Dale took his coffee black and his football personal. My daddy, Earl, lived 20 minutes away, 89 years old, sharp as a filleting knife, stubborn as red clay. He'd survived a war, a refinery, and my mother's cooking, and he had exactly one piece of advice he'd been giving me since 1975. Ruthie, don't ever sign nothing you can't walk away from. Remember that. It matters later. The spring I turned 62, the clinic that contracted my caregiving work called me into the office. New management. Restructuring. A woman half my age with a clipboard told me they were moving in a younger direction, except she didn't say it that way. She said it with words like energy and digital literacy, and then she slid a severance envelope across the desk like she was doing me a favor. 31 years of emptying bedpans and holding dying hands, and I was walked to the parking lot by security like I might steal a stapler. Dale found me sitting in the truck, still holding the envelope. He didn't say anything at first. He just reached over and turned on the radio to the gospel station, and we sat there in the heat, and finally he said, "Ruthie, we've been broke before. Broke ain't broken." That was Dale. 4 words and a wall you could lean your whole life against. I want you to hold on to this picture of us for a minute. The crooked porch swing, the gospel station, 2 people in their 60s who thought the worst thing that could happen already had. Because 11 days later, the rain started, and it did not stop. The weathermen called it a rain event. I have hated that phrase ever since. An event is a church picnic. What came for us was something else. 3 days of rain, and then the bayou behind Choctaw Drive stopped being behind anything. It came through the fence line on a Tuesday afternoon, brown and quiet and fast. That's what nobody tells you about floods. They're quiet. No siren in the water itself. Just a hiss, like the whole earth exhaling. By dark, it was inside the house. Dale and I moved everything we could to the countertops, then to the attic stairs, and then we stopped moving things and started thinking about ourselves. The rescue boats were out. We could hear them, but the water was rising faster than the sound was getting closer. Dale went out to untie the neighbor's dog. Miss O'Deal's old hound, chained to a carport post 2 houses down, screaming into the dark. She was 84 and already evacuated, and that dog was all she had, and Dale Culpepper was not a man who could sit in an attic and listen to something drown. 2 minutes, he said. He squeezed my hand. He was smiling. I need you to know that. My husband went out that door smiling, in his rubber boots, holding a flashlight, into water that was moving like it had somewhere to be. He got the dog loose. I saw the flashlight beam swing back toward me. I saw it, I swear before God, maybe 40 feet from the house. And then the water made a sound like a door slamming, and the light was gone. They found Dale 2 days later, a half-mile downstream, tangled in a stranger's fence. The dog survived. I want to tell you I'm glad about that, and most days now, I am. The shelter was a FEMA setup in a school gymnasium, cots in rows, donated blankets that smelled like other people's houses, a noise that never stopped. I sat on cot number 117 for 4 days without speaking. I had a garbage bag with 2 photo albums, my Bible, and one of Dale's flannel shirts that had been in the truck and stayed dry. That was my whole life, in a bag they use for leaves. On the 5th day, a young man crouched down in front of my cot with a clipboard, and I nearly told him to get away from me. I'd had enough of clipboards, but he set it down, on the floor, and he just sat. "Ma'am, my name is Ethan Caldwell. I'm a lawyer with the Disaster Relief Project. I'm not here to make you fill anything out. I heard what your husband did. 45 years old, maybe. Tired eyes. Good shoes ruined by floodwater and clearly not caring. He got my FEMA claim unstuck. He fought the insurance company that tried to call the flood rising water, not wind-driven. Don't get me started. And the day I left that gymnasium, he shook my hand and said something I'd remember for years. Mrs. Culpepper, I've watched 100 people lose everything this month. You're the only one who asked how I was holding up. Don't let the world waste that." I thought I'd never see that man again. I have never been more wrong about anything in my life. Grief is not a feeling. That's what they don't tell you. Grief is a schedule. It's waking at 4 a.m. because that's when his alarm used to go off. It's cooking too much rice for 11 months straight. It's reaching for the phone to tell Dale a funny thing and holding it, mid-air, while the funny thing dies in your hand. I moved in with Daddy Earl. 2 stubborn old people in a shotgun house arguing about the thermostat to keep from crying. He never once told me it would be okay. He'd just slide his coffee across the table to me, black, the way Dale took it, and say, "Drink that. Then we'll see about the day." The insurance money, what Ethan had pried loose, covered the funeral and the debts and not much else. At 62, with no house, no husband, and a resume that a clipboard girl had already called outdated, I did what women like me have always done. I looked for work. And here's where God, or fate, or whatever name you give the thing that steers us, did something strange. A woman I'd cared for years earlier had a daughter who'd married into Charleston society, and this daughter remembered me. The one who stayed nights with Mama and never charged extra. There was a position, she said. Private. Difficult. Extremely well paid, because nobody lasted. An elderly gentleman in Charleston, South Carolina. A jewelry magnate. He'd run off 4 caregivers in a year and a half. What's wrong with him? I asked. She paused. Nothing's wrong with him. He's just meaner than a wet cat and richer than sin, and his family circles that house like buzzards over roadkill. I took the job over the phone. Daddy Earl drove me to the bus station himself, put my suitcase in my hand, and gave me a version of the old speech. Ruthie, don't sign nothing. Charleston. If you've never seen it, magnolias and iron gates and houses that have been beautiful for so long, they've gotten arrogant about it. The Brandt mansion sat behind a brick wall on the Battery, 3 stories of white columns, and when the housekeeper opened the door, the first thing I heard, echoing down a hallway lined with oil paintings, was a man's voice shouting, "And tell whoever they sent this time that I don't need a nurse, I need to be left alone." The housekeeper winced. "That'll be Mr. Brandt." I picked up my suitcase, walked down that hallway, stepped into a study full of dark wood and old smoke, looked at the furious silver-haired man in the leather chair, and said the first thing that came to me. "Fine by me. I'll be in the kitchen making coffee. When you're done being left alone, it'll be hot." Silence. The housekeeper's mouth fell open, and Walter Brandt, terror of 4 caregivers, scourge of Charleston, narrowed his eyes at me and said, "Black. No sugar." That's how it started. Walter Brandt and I did not become friends quickly, because Walter didn't do anything quickly except judge people. But somewhere between his blood pressure readings and my refusal to be scared of him, something settled. I learned his mornings, the heart pills at 8, the walk to the garden wall and back, the Wall Street Journal he read cover to cover and argued with out loud. I learned he'd built the Brandt jewelry empire from one pawn shop counter, that his wife had died 14 years back, that he ate supper alone at a table built for 16. And I learned the family. Lord, did I learn the family. His sister Vivian, pearls, frost, and a smile she kept in a drawer for special occasions. His brother Russell, golf tan, gambling debts, always just dropping by on days the accountant came. And Dolores, the widow of his late brother, the dangerous one, honestly, because she was the only one smart enough to pretend to be kind. She'd sweep in with casseroles nobody ate and say things like, "Bless your heart, Ruth Ann, it's so noble what you people do. And you people sat in the air like perfume gone wrong. They came for one reason. Everyone knew it, including Walter." Especially Walter. "You know what I am to them?" he asked me one October evening on the porch, sweet tea going warm at his elbow. "I'm a reading of the will with a pulse." "Then why let them in the door?" He was quiet a long moment. "Because an empty house is worse. You know that. I've watched you know that." That was the thing about Walter. Mean as a wet cat, sure, but he saw people. And what he saw in me, a woman who'd lost everything to the water and got on a bus anyway. He never called brave, because Walter didn't hand out compliments. He just started asking my opinion. On the news, on his doctors, eventually, quietly, on his family. The proposal came on a Sunday in March, and it was the least romantic proposal in the history of South Carolina, and I wouldn't change a word of it. He set down his coffee, looked at me across the kitchen table, and said, "Ruth Ann, my lawyers tell me that no matter how I write my will, that pack of buzzards will drag it through probate for a decade and tear up everything I built. There's one thing in this state they can't easily break." He paused. "A wife." I laughed, out loud. He didn't. I'm not asking for romance. I'm 78 years old. I'm asking for an ally. You'd want for nothing. Your father would want for nothing. And when I go, everything I have keeps them from getting the one thing they want, which as far as I'm concerned is the finest use of a fortune I ever heard of. I called Daddy Earl that night. You already know what he said. Ruthie, don't sign nothing you can't walk away from. And for the first time in my life, I told my daddy no. Because I looked at my whole road, the clipboard girl, the water, the garbage bag, cot 117, and I decided that this once, life had slid an envelope across the desk to me. I said yes to Walter Brandt. I did not know that saying yes would put me in a prison cell, and I did not know that the one person who tried to warn me, really warn me, was already standing inside that house. The engagement hit Charleston society like a dropped chandelier. Vivian went white, then lawyer shopping. Russell laughed until he understood it was real, then stopped laughing permanently. And Dolores hugged me, held both my hands, misted up on cue, and said, I think it's just beautiful. I'd been reading people at bedsides for 30 years, and I wanted on record. That was the moment I got afraid. You can defend against hatred. It's the tenderness of an enemy that you can't see around. 2 weeks before the wedding, Walter's godson came home from a legal aid project out west to stand as his witness. Walter talked about this godson constantly. The only one of the whole circle he trusted, the one that turned out decent. I was arranging flowers in the front hall when the door opened, and Ethan Caldwell walked into the house, the lawyer from the gymnasium, the man who sat on the floor by cot 117. Standing in the doorway of the mansion, staring at me like I was a ghost, while the housekeeper announced, Mr. Ethan, this is Miss Ruth Ann, Mr. Brandt's fiancée. I watched something break behind that man's eyes. He shook my hand like a stranger. Congratulations, he said, in a voice that had barbed wire in it, and for weeks after, he barely looked at me. And when he did, it was worse, because it wasn't contempt in his face. It was grief. He thought the woman from the shelter had become exactly what Dolores called me at every opportunity. A gold digger with good timing. He tried once, caught me alone in the garden 3 days before the ceremony. Mrs. Culpepper, Ruth Ann, I know what losing everything does to a person, but you don't know this family. You don't know what's in this house. Please! And then Vivian's voice came around the hedge, and he closed his mouth, and that sentence stayed unfinished for 6 years. You don't know what's in this house. The wedding itself was small and strange, and in its way, lovely. Garden ceremony under the live oaks, 50 guests who mostly hated me. Daddy Earl refused to come, the only wound of that day that was mine alone. Walter wore his father's watch and stood straighter than I'd seen him stand in a year, and when the officiant got to the vows, Walter went off script. He took my hands and said quietly, so only I heard, Nobody stayed in the room since my wife died. You stayed. That's the whole speech. I cried, not bride tears, caregiver tears. There's a difference, and if you've done the work, you know it. At the reception, the family performed Happiness like community theater, champagne, a quartet. Dolores giving a toast about family meaning more than blood that should have won an award. Walter tired early, the way he always did, and at 9 he pressed my hand and went up to the study to rest, and told me, same as every night, our oldest ritual, 10 o'clock, Ruth Ann, don't be late. I was 2 minutes early. It didn't matter. This is the scene I told you I'd describe once, so listen close. 9:58 p.m. I went up the back staircase, still in my ivory dress, carrying his heart medication and a glass of water on the small silver tray we always used. The music from the garden was faint up there. The study door was unlatched, unusual. Walter latched everything, a pawn shop habit 70 years old. Inside, one lamp burning. Walter in his leather chair, head back, and I knew before I crossed the room. 30 years at bedsides, you know the difference between sleep and gone the way you know your own name. But this wasn't the going I'd been hired to watch for. His medication bottle, the one from his desk drawer, not the one on my tray, was open on the blotter. The crystal whiskey glass beside it, an inch of amber still in it. Walter allowed himself exactly one glass on special occasions, and Lord knows the day qualified. On the floor, his father's watch, the band broken, stopped at 9:41. And one more thing. The thing. The window to the side gallery was open 6 inches, and the room smelled, under the smoke and the old books, like gardenias. Not garden gardenias, perfume gardenias. I didn't register it then. I was screaming for help by that point, starting compressions I already knew were hopeless, my wedding dress soaking up spilled whiskey at the knees. I registered it 6 years later, in a cell at 3 in the morning, sitting bolt upright. But we'll get there. What happened next happened fast, the way disasters do. Guests on the stairs, sirens, Dolores in the doorway with her hand over her mouth, and even in my shock, some cold caregiver corner of my brain noted that she was crying without any tears. The coroner, the questions, then the autopsy. Walter's heart medication, at 5 times his dose, dissolved in the whiskey. The whiskey I had access to, the medication I dispensed. In the house where I just, hours earlier, signed a marriage license and, per the prenup Walter himself insisted on, become the primary beneficiary of the entire Brandt estate. Last person to see him. First person to find him. Only person who profited. Vivian testified I'd isolated Walter. Russell testified I'd rushed the wedding. And Dolores, soft, tender Dolores, took the stand, dabbed her dry eyes and told the jury, I tried so hard to love her like family. Bless her heart. 12 strangers looked at a 62-year-old caregiver from the wrong side of a Louisiana levee, sitting next to a public defender fresh out of school, and they did the arithmetic the prosecution handed them. Guilty. The gavel came down, and the last thing I saw as they turned me around was Ethan Caldwell, standing in the back row of that courtroom. He was the only person in the building who looked unsure. I'm not going to give you 6 years of prison in misery order because I didn't survive it that way, and I won't retell it that way. I'll give you what mattered. Year 1, I stopped speaking almost entirely. Grief had a schedule, prison had a louder one, and it ran on bells. I was inmate 44172, the black widow of the battery, the tabloids' phrase, and it followed me inside like a smell. Year 2, an inmate named Cookie, in for check fraud and unbeatable at spades, sat across from me in the yard and said, Old lady, you gonna haunt this place or live in it? I started working the infirmary that month. Turns out a prison is full of people who need somebody to stay in the room. Blood pressure checks, insulin, holding the hand of a 70-year-old lifer while she passed because her people had stopped coming in 1998. My sentence had taken my name, but it could not take my work. Year 3, Daddy Earl came. First visit. He was 93 by then, cane in one hand, and he sat down across the glass, looked at me a long time and said, I ain't never once thought you did it, Ruthie. I just couldn't watch them say it. We put our hands on the glass like they do in movies. Foolish old pair. Best day of the whole 6 years. Year 4, Ethan Caldwell wrote to me. 1 page. I've left the firm. I've been going through the case file on my own time. The perfume, the responding officer's notes mention a floral smell in the study. Nobody ever chased it. Did you smell it? Right back. I sat on my bunk with that letter shaking in my hands because that was the night, that 3 a.m., when the gardenia came back to me. Walter's study smelled like gardenias, and Walter hated cut flowers, and the window was open. And I had spent hours of my life in rooms with the woman who wore that exact perfume, who dabbed it on both wrists before she carried in casseroles nobody ate. Year 5, Ethan filed. Motions, appeals, records requests. He found the pharmacy log showing a refill of Walter's medication picked up 8 days before the wedding, signed for by family, no ID recorded. He found Russell's gambling debts, paid off in full 3 months after the estate was frozen. He found the quartet's invoice from the reception, billed to Dolores personally, with a handwritten note requesting they play At the garden's far end. The far end, away from the house, away from the side gallery window. None of it was enough alone. Together, it was a shape. Year 6, at 68 years old, I sat in front of a parole board in a pressed uniform and told them the truth, which is all I had ever told anybody. I did not kill my husband, but I will comply with every condition you set, because I can't find who did from in here. Parole granted. Conditional. The record still said guilty. I walked out of those gates into white sunlight, and Ethan Caldwell was leaning against a 10-year-old sedan, holding 2 cups of gas station coffee. "Black, no sugar," he said. "Let's go get your name back." You want to know what freedom looks like at 68 with a felony record? It looks like a rented room over a Waffle House outside Charleston, a parole officer named Ms. Tibbs who did not smile for 4 months, and a job, the Waffle House itself, night shift, because the manager's grandmother had been one of my patients decades ago, and he said, "Miss Ruth Ann, I don't care what a jury said. My Meemaw loved you. You start Tuesday." Scattered, smothered, covered. Dale would have laughed himself sideways. Every night after close, Ethan came in with the file boxes, and we worked the case at the corner booth like 2 fools with a conspiracy wall, except the conspiracy was real. The shape was clear to us by then. The perfume, the pharmacy log, the quartet moved away from the window. But shape isn't proof. Dolores had spent 6 years as the estate's tireless, grieving guardian, fighting my inheritance in probate for the family's honor, and Charleston loved her for it. "We need the bottle," Ethan said one night, rubbing his eyes, "or the gloves, or the pharmacy slip, or anything with her hands on it. She's had 6 years to burn it all." And that's when I put down my coffee, because 30 years of caregiving rose up in me all at once, and I said something I'd never thought to say out loud. She wouldn't burn it. She'd hide it. That woman never threw away anything with power in it. She kept every letter, every receipt, every grudge. And Ethan. I know that house. I know it the way none of them ever bothered to. I bathed its owner. I inventoried its medicine. I know which floorboard in the side gallery lifts, because Walter showed me himself. His daddy's pawn shop habit, a hidey hole in every building he ever owned. He kept his first $1 in it. He said, I stopped. My heart was going like a hammer. He said, "Nobody knows about this but you now, Ruth Ann. My family never sat with me long enough to learn anything." But somebody had been in that side gallery the night of the wedding. Somebody wearing gardenia perfume, standing at an open window, listening for the study to go quiet. And if that somebody, in 6 years of ruling that house, had ever needed a place no appraiser, no lawyer, no buzzard sibling would ever find, Ethan was already standing, reaching for his keys. "The estate's still frozen," he said. "The house is under court supervision. We can't just walk in." "No," I said, "but a court can. Get me 1 judge, 1 hour, and 1 screwdriver." It took 4 months, motions, denials, 1 appellate judge with an open mind. Ms. Tibbs, my unsmiling parole officer, personally vouching for my compliance, turns out she'd been watching after all. And on a gray Thursday morning in Charleston, with a court officer, a forensic tech, Ethan, and a very pale estate attorney as witnesses, I walked back into the Brandt mansion for the first time in 6 years. Down the hall of arrogant oil paintings, past the study door I did not look at, into the side gallery where the morning light fell in stripes and the air, I swear it, still remembered gardenias. 3rd floorboard from the window. I knelt down, 68 years old, in front of witnesses and lifted it with my own hands. Inside Walter's hidey hole, wrapped in a silk headscarf that half of Charleston had seen Dolores wear, was a small brown pharmacy bottle, the missing refill, 8 pills short, a pair of thin cotton gloves, and a folded page in Dolores's handwriting. The dosage math worked out like a grocery list. Why keep it? For 6 years, I asked. The forensic psychologist at her trial had an answer I think about still. Some people keep trophies, some keep insurance. Dolores had spent her whole widowed life inside a family that treated her as furniture. That page was the one power she had ever held over the Brants, proof she'd beaten them all, and she could not make herself destroy it. She hid it in the one house she ruled, never dreaming that the floor itself had already chosen a side. Walter had shown his hiding place to exactly one living soul, the caregiver, the nobody, the one who stayed in the room. The rest went quick, the way the truth does once it's loose. Fingerprints inside the gloves. Her pharmacist ex-brother-in-law, immunity in hand, confirming who family was on that unsigned pickup. My conviction vacated on a Tuesday in spring. I stood in the same courthouse where they'd turned me around in handcuffs. And this time the judge looked at me and said the three words I'd waited 2,247 days to hear. You are exonerated. Daddy Earl was in the front row, 95 years old. He stood up on his cane, and my daddy, who does not clap for anything, who didn't clap when the Saints won the Super Bowl, clapped until the bailiff got nervous. And here's the ending nobody expects, so I'll just say it plain. The Brant estate came to me, as Walter wrote it. Vivian and Russell got what the will gave them, $1 each for services rendered because Walter was mean as a wet cat to the very last page. And the fortune the buzzards circled for decades? Most of it is a foundation now. It builds flood housing in Louisiana. It pays caregivers a wage that doesn't need a second job. The first facility opened last year off Choctaw Drive, close enough to the water to remember and far enough to be safe. It's called the Dale Culpepper House. There's a porch swing out front. I had them build it crooked. Ethan runs the foundation's legal office. People ask with their eyebrows what he and I are to each other, and I tell them the truth. He's the man who sat on the floor by cot 117 when I was nothing, and there is no word for that in English, so we just have supper on Sundays and let Charleston wonder. I'm 68 years old. Wait, no. I'm 69 now. Had a birthday in freedom. Cake and everything. So here is what I know, and I'm handing it to you like Walter handed me his hiding place. They can take your house, your husband, your job, your name, and 6 years of your one life. And if you are still breathing, you are still in the room. And the one who stays in the room is the one who finds what the floor kept. It's never too late for justice. It was not too late for me. Now, you tell me. Have you ever been blamed for something you didn't do? And did the truth ever come out? Write it in the comments and tell me what city you're watching from, because tomorrow night I'll be back with another story, and I read every single word y'all leave me. Good night, sugar. Lock your doors and check your floorboards.